Do you need to do things there? Or can you hold this one?
Maria, will you do the countdown when we are live?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not Maria.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, not Maria.
Either way, okay.
Last second producer. No.
Rare name, yeah.
Yeah. No, Anna Maria. Anna Maria, can you hear me? Will you do the countdown? Okay. Sorry for that, Maria.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Well,
we can hear you now.
Yeah. I'm trying to get the sound a little bit louder.
Okay.
Earphones needed.
Okay. Yeah, we hear you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You have to give me a... Welcome to the Museum of Movements and Freedom Talk number 3, this time in collaboration with London-based Index on Censorship. My name is Anna Maria, and I'm very happy to introduce her moderator, Zandra Thuvesson. Zandra is a very experienced moderator specializing in culture, politics, media, and artistic freedom. I will leave the word now to Zandra to introduce her amazing panel for this important discussion. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Malmö, and hello from Stockholm. We have a panel here with us from different parts of the world. I will introduce them, each one. First, we have Maria Ordzhonikidze from the, you're working
Justice for Journalists Foundation.
Justice for Journalists, and you're based in London, but you're
yes.
From Russia in the beginning. Yeah. And welcome as well, Mark Frary. You're from Index, an associate editor there. Warm welcome to you as well.
Thanks, Zandra. It's good to be here. But like many people, I'm actually out in the countryside at the moment because we're not going into the office.
Okay, okay, great. And as well, we have from Nizhny Novgorod, we have Alexander Pichugin. Is that correct?
Hello.
Hello.
Pichugin.
A very warm welcome to you as well. We're so happy to have you here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity.
Just to say as well, you are the journalist who will give us some witnesses from the ground here today. Maria and Mark has been working together on a project, the censorship project, disease control, that they will give us more information about soon. As we all know, we are affected very much during this pandemic time. Since mid-February, Mark and Maria's organization, Justice for Journalists and Index on Censorship, have been working on, because they're so experienced monitoring these kinds of situations. They knew early on that something was going in the wrong way. So they made contact. I have asked the three of you to give some 3-4 minutes keynote, like a point of view from your position. What has been happening? Why did we have to start monitoring the threats to journalists that we already before knew was so bad? What was going to happen even more in a pandemic situation? Maria, could you please start with giving your history?
Thank you very much, Zandra, and thank you very much for inviting Justice for Journalists Foundation to be on this panel. So we are a rather new organization. We're just 2 years old, and we were found after the group of Russian investigative journalists was ambushed and murdered in the Central African Republic, and no official investigation followed. As a result, the foundation deemed its purpose to issue grants for investigation of violent crimes against journalists. As well, we are providing educational resources and courses for journalists to help with their security. And we also, the third kind of big area of our work is monitoring of attacks and violations against media workers in the former Soviet Union. When Index of Censorship approached us in mid-March with the idea of monitoring the situation that was unveiling around the COVID-19 and following violations against journalists and freedom of speech, we thought that it's a brilliant idea because we were already monitoring the situation of violations, and we are uniquely positioned with a very large network in these 12 former Soviet Union countries from which we receive daily updates and alerts on various types of attacks on journalists. So
which
excuse
these
me?
countries are? Could you tell us?
12 former Soviet republics. So these are everything apart from Baltic states that are now part of the European Union. So the biggest being, of course, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, Armenia, Georgia. So these countries, sorry?
Belarus?
Belarus, of course, yes, 12 countries. So yes, so we were monitoring them already, and we contacted our network, and they happily agreed to monitor all the violations that were taking place in their countries, as it was already quite noticeable. And of course, we will probably speak about the details later on this roundtable. But the main conclusion that we came up with is that in this unprecedented situation with the pandemic, the autocratic regimes of the Central Asia, of Belarus and Russia used the pandemics to suppress the free speech. So the goal was not to eliminate the fakes, as it was claimed, not to eliminate the false statistic, as it was claimed. The goal was to suppress the free speech, to ensure that there is no other information coming out about the situation rather than from the official sources. And the official sources were not interested in producing correct information. They were just interested in silencing the truth, unfortunately. So the main two violations that the journalists received were spreading fakes and disinformation, and the second one was just breaking this freshly introduced rules of self-isolation, quarantine, emergency, etc. This was the main finding, and I will let Mark speak about the whole, the wider world, because this obviously the Index of Censorship was initially they intended to monitor just Europe, but as they started doing this job, they have received alerts from all over the world, so it became a global project.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Mark, let's move towards you. Index organization has been around for a much longer time. Could you give us the context of your organization?
Yeah, sure. So Index on Censorship in 2022 will celebrate its 50th anniversary. So we were set up really to give a voice to censored artists and activists, and we have a very long heritage with the Soviet Union. We were one of the publications that published the works of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, for example, from captivity there. So that's something that we've been doing for those 5 decades. Media freedom has been something that we've looked at very carefully over that time, in addition to artistic freedom. And what we know is that whenever there's a crisis like the COVID crisis, although many say that's an unprecedented one, authoritarian leaders use that as cover to clamp down both on activists and on journalists. And unfortunately, that's proven to be the case. I think, you know, we didn't have a crystal ball when we started this project. We started discussing it in February, and the reason we were doing it then is because we could already tell that China was not revealing everything that was going on in Wuhan, as was widely covered at the time. And you know, there are those who argue that if they had been more open and they'd allowed journalists and doctors to speak rather than silencing them, then the world wouldn't be in the position that it is today, with most of it in lockdown and economies in free fall, journalists and bloggers having been attacked, detained, and in some cases disappeared, as has happened in China. And so, as I say, you know, we've seen this in the past. We've worked on media freedom projects in the past where we see authoritarian leaders using these opportunities to clamp down, and so it was very good to start a collaboration with Maria and JFJ on this. I mean, we had originally thought of targeting just Europe. We weren't sure exactly what we would see in Europe, but it became clear very quickly that you know, there were going to be media freedom restrictions there as well as all around the world. And yes, the former Soviet Union has probably had the most attacks that we've recorded through this project, but they have occurred all through the world. So I just thought it'd be useful just to talk a little bit about how we actually did this project. So my background is really as a you know, I'm actually a scientist by training. I'm a nuclear physicist back in you know, the 1990s, but I then moved into journalism and technical journalism particularly. So I have a sort of a fairly strong grounding in technology, and one of the things that I've been doing is sort of data journalism over the years, and I've worked for newspapers like the Times and the Sunday Times here in the UK, as well as with Index on Censorship. So it seemed logical to me that we should do an interactive project looking at this, and obviously with the nature of it being global, that we should do a global map illustrating some of these incidents. So the way it worked is we set up a form where people could report their incidents. We obviously have our own team in the UK of staff, but also an extended network of correspondents, just as Maria and JFJ do, that we use on a daily basis, not just on this project, but to inform us of what's going on in the world. So, you know, at the moment we're hearing from people, you know, not as part of this project, but we're hearing from people in Belarus and the Philippines and, you know, all over the world. Lots going on right at this moment, you know, beyond what's being restricted during COVID. So it's important to note that the report that we've come out with now, it doesn't represent every attack that's occurred on journalists and bloggers over that time, but we think it's important to verify these incidents. So whenever we're informed of one by, you know, one of our team or network or a reader of the magazine, then we have to investigate that to make sure that it's actually a legitimate report of attack, because there's lots of disinformation, as we know a lot, and so that involves, you know, looking for independent media sources and witnesses and statements and speaking to the individuals like Alexander, who's on this call with us now. And the way we've dealt with those incidents is we've categorized them in lots of different ways. So we've categorized them as, you know, attacks on journalists, so whether that's a physical attack, you know, a verbal attack or a mental attack. We've also looked at things like changes in legislation that make it more difficult for the media to report. So one example of this that we've noted a lot of is restrictions on freedom of information, for example. So, you know, many countries around the world have freedom of information legislation allowing journalists to ask the government what's been going on and what the official response is. And, you know, a lot of what's been happening is that that's been very restricted during COVID, partly, some say, because it's, you know, physically more difficult for those people, the politicians and the authorities, to provide this information, but some are using it as a cover to not provide this information because they don't want the official line to come out. And I think and then and the other thing we've noted a lot of as well is, and Maria alluded to this in her introduction as well, is the restriction of reporting to official state journalists as well. And I'm sure Alexander will talk about this as well. So in many countries, even in the UK, which, relatively is free in terms of its media, we've seen restrictions on the questions that people are allowed to ask and who's allowed to ask those questions. So in terms of, actual incidents, the most common has been detention and arrest. So people being detained by the police and arrested often on trumped up charges relating to the states of emergency that often have been introduced around the world. But we've also seen more than 50 physical attacks on journalists as well. I think Donald Trump needs a special mention here. I mean, he hasn't been physically attacking journalists, but his verbal attacks have increased during COVID, as many reporters have challenged him on his handling of the COVID crisis. And the last thing I probably want to say in this introduction is really, this report that we've released today, and you can see that on our website at indexoncensorship.org/media freedom during COVID, and also on the JFJ site. They've produced their newsletter today, so you can see the copies of that. That report relates to the period up to mid-September, when we have reported more than 240 verified incidents around the world. So, what we thought of back in February and March, it's really been borne out by the evidence. This was really a huge problem that was waiting to happen. And we recognize that obviously there's a global health crisis going on, and that certain individual freedoms need to be restricted, but it shouldn't extend to media and bloggers, because unless we have open, transparent discussion of this information around the pandemic, how are we going to get through this?
How? Yeah, great. Thank you, Mark. I will get back to you with some questions with what
Sure.
you presented now. But first, Alexander, I want to say hi to you and welcome again. You are, just for backdrop information, you are the first journalist in Russia to be put on trial for writing journalism about the COVID with a new law regarding to fake news. They have accused you of fake news when you reported on COVID, the pandemic situation, and you're just waiting for information about how the trial has been going these days.
Yes. The decision will be, I guess, in mid-November.
Yeah. So please tell us, how do you work, and what is your background, and give us the context of your situation.
I'm working in Nizhny Novgorod. It's quite big city east from Moscow, 300 miles east from Moscow, over 1 million inhabitants. We got a lot of newspapers, TV channels, and internet sites, but all of them actually just rewriting the official information about the coronavirus, and it's not a problem for journalists if they just rewrite all the official things. But if you want some exclusive information, you got to be very careful, because we got some new articles in the Russian criminal code. The authorities issued that articles as a part of preparation for the pandemic, and they say that it needs to prevent panic among people. And right now I got one of these articles on me. They accuse me in spreading fake news, although it wasn't news. It was just my personal opinion about the whole situation at the start period of pandemic. I saw a lot of people gathering in Russian churches on April 12. That was some kind of traditional Orthodox rituals a week before Russian Orthodox Easter. And we got all the cafes, all the restaurants, all the parks closed at that time, and only the churches opened their doors and welcomed people. I was actually very angry because it was completely against all the rules and all the barriers that local officials try to set to prevent spreading of the coronavirus. So I was disappointed a lot, and I just can't be silent. I couldn't be silent, and I wrote about this situation in all my official resources, and after that, I just tried to express my emotions, to describe the situation in more emotional way on my anonymous Telegram channel. That was a small quote, small article, but it was maybe a little bit rough, but I just can't hold it inside, because I compared all these churches, all these rituals and crowded churches to the planned action of infecting people, and actually that was true, because I think it's an axiom, because every scientist will tell you that if you got a lot of people in some narrow space, you got high risk of spreading the infection far beyond that place. And I must admit that I was right, because 2 weeks after this situation, after my article was wrote, we got some big source of infection in the largest local Orthodox monastery. It was the town of Diveevo, and the whole town was set on quarantine. And I think that that was the direct result of violation of the epidemiological rules on April 12th, the day I wrote my article. It was emotional. It was maybe rough a little bit, but I must mention that I deleted my article the day after writing, because I got a call from FSB, former KGB organization, and they told me to delete it. And in a few minutes, they called me back again and said, "Hold on, don't delete. Let it exist for a while." So I realized that they had some kind of plan about me, and I deleted my text, but it didn't help. And just in 2 days, 2 days later, there was a knock on my door. It was a squad of 9 people, an investigator, FSB officers, people in camouflage who handcuffed me and scared my pregnant wife and took my phone and my laptop. And 2 months later, my case was sent to court, despite an explanation given by the Supreme Court of Russia back on April 30. The Supreme Court has explained what kind of news the police can call fake news, and they told that it should look a lot like real news. It must include all the quotes, names, documents, possibly fake videos, and all that stuff. And none of them was in my article. My article was emotional point of view, but it did not stop the investigators. And now I'm in waiting of the court decision. I guess I will be fined for quite a big sum of money, and I must admit that my colleague and my friend Irina Slavina, who tragically died on October 12th, on October 2nd here in Nizhny Novgorod, also was fined they accused her in spreading the fake news about the coronavirus, but it was a so-called administrative article of Russian administrative code. And I'm actually the first journalist with a criminal code on me. I don't know what decision to expect, but the independent experts said that my article wasn't news. It was personal opinion. It's very hard to expect how judge will plead me guilty, but I guess I need to save a lot of money right now to be ready. It's a ridiculous situation. I need to, as we said in Russia, I need to prove that I'm not a camel. The whole situation here in Russia for journalism is getting darker and darker every month, every day. Fines, police searches, and all the state of pressure in general. It's a huge part of our journalists' life. I'm not an optimistic actually about the future, nearest future. If I will plead not guilty, I will be very excuse me, I'm a little bit emotional right now because it's the longest English speech in my life, and thank you for this opportunity to tell you about this situation.
Your English is very good.
It's not good to have a criminal article, criminal case on you. It's not what I expected 20 years ago when I decided to be a journalist.
Have you been able to work with other journalists during this period since you were accused of this?
Yes, I'm trying to work, but I need to hold some information because I don't want to be a repeat offender in the authorities' eyes. I got some exclusive information about the real situation of the pandemic here in Nizhny Novgorod region, but now I'm trying to hold it inside because it's quite dangerous right now.
Because you're waiting for the verdict.
Yes, I'm waiting for decision.
Do you get support from other media platforms in Russia, like Novaya Gazeta and others?
Yeah, lots of media resources, platforms wrote about my story, but actually I don't need to be very famous about in that case. Yeah. I just want to continue my work and continue my job and do it as usual.
Yeah. So, Maria, can I ask you regarding your organization is covering 12 countries. I asked you before when we talked. Maybe this is the thing that sticks out, or have you seen other things that really stick out during this pandemic situation regarding the 12 countries that you cover mainly? Sound.
Sound. Yes, as Alexander was just explaining, the criminalization of fake news just was swiftly introduced by the Russian authorities. And as people were getting accusation under the administrative code before, once this new criminal code article number 207, I think,
Yes.
207, yeah, the criminal code article, yeah, point 1, yes, that is specifically about writing fake news on coronavirus. Since it was introduced, Alexander was the first one to be accused under it, and then 15 more cases followed. Whereas on administrative charges, about 50 journalists were accused. So that's if we talk about Russia. But if we look elsewhere, for example, countries like Belarus and Tajikistan, and of course Turkmenistan, initially for the first several months of the virus, they just said, there is no virus in our country. They completely refused to acknowledge that there is, such thing as pandemics, global pandemics. That of course doesn't exclude any country. The borders, are not stopping it, and of course that resulted. And all the journalists who tried to write about the real situation, and here we're talking, of course, about Belarus mainly, because in Turkmenistan there is no independent journalism. There's absolutely dictated country, so there's nobody writes about things that are happening there from inside. There are some independent media from outside. So in these countries, the situation got really awful because people didn't know what is going on, and they didn't take any precautions. So what happened is that fake information distributed by these particular countries killed a lot of people because people didn't know that they have to take measures to protect themselves. Yes, and in terms of violent crimes against journalists, that was not that active, mainly in the countries that we were looking in, these 12 countries. The main problem with violent crimes against journalists, I mean beatings, that was surprisingly Ukraine. And in this country, the owners of small businesses were the ones who would beat up journalists for independent journalists mainly, again, who were covering the situation with the lack of precautionary measures, the lack of masks, the not following epidemiological rules, and these were subjected to violent beatings. In Russia, there were also some violent crimes against journalists. We registered 3 cases, and astonishingly, all 3 cases of beating up journalists happened in Russian Orthodox churches, where either the priests themselves or the church goers would beat up the journalists exactly for uncovering the real situation with lack of measures. So, but in majority of cases, the perpetrators of attacks against journalists, and here we're talking about the legal or quasi-legal attacks, were the governmental bodies, the police, the parliaments, the various embassies and departments. That they were the ones who would be the perpetrators of attacks. In Russia, there was 3/4 of attacks came from the authorities. In Belarus, 90% of attacks were coming from authorities. In Kazakhstan, 55% of attacks, and that sort of thing. So what is obvious here is the impact on the health and safety of the populations of these countries, of course, because fakes that were distributed by the official channels kill. And in Russia, again, the main fakes that were distributed through official channels are those that were spread by the Russian federal TV channels, like the virus doesn't exist, or the virus was created by Bill Gates, or that sort of things. So yeah, and just as a result,
yeah, the disease control really covers 2 levels. It's both the attack on journalists and then the killing of ordinary people on the ground.
Yes, as a result of lack of independent of information, the Russian population, for example, the official prognosis this year is that the Russian population is going to shrink by 350,000 people. So roughly the population of Malmö, Swedish third city, right? And it's 11 times more than in 2019. And this is official figures, so we can understand that probably unofficially it's going to be even more. Yeah, this is the result of suppressing the independent reporting and truth.
Thank you, Maria. Mark, I wanted to move further to you. We talked about journalists becoming scapegoats in this situation, and we really see it in the United States with the Trump in his rhetorics and so on, blaming journalists with the message. Could you give us, could you lay out the words about this situation?
Yeah, sure, Zandra. So I just sort of want to, go back a little bit on what Maria had said. I mean, we noticed that fake news thing happening a lot around the world, not just in Russia and the former Soviet Union. We saw that, I think we had 30 different incidents related to fake news. And, and that brings me nicely on to Donald Trump, obviously, who's really sort of popularized that idea that, you can decide if you're an authoritarian leader what makes fake news. And by the very fact, ever since he came to power, he's been denouncing what his critics have been saying about him as fake news. It really it's enabled an environment in which attacks on the media have become acceptable, I think, particularly in the US, obviously, and we've seen this with one of our other partners, actually, with the US Freedom Tracker, who've been tracking attacks on journalists for the last few years, but specifically this year in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protest. So they recorded hundreds of attacks on journalists during those protests, and many of them were from security forces, the police, but also, worryingly, many of them are from members of the public as well. And I think this is something that we've certainly noticed over the period of COVID, is that the media has been allowed to become a target of people's anger against the restrictions that are being placed on them. So obviously we're all annoyed by having our the freedom of these restrictions on us, not being able to see our families and things like this. And so clearly that's people don't like that, but I have certainly noticed, and maybe this is anecdotal for me as well, but I've certainly noticed as a journalist that people treat journalists in a different way now. And I certainly from the start of COVID, I've started noticing people being more critical of journalists on social media and about what they're reporting. I mean, certainly here in the UK, we had very early on in this, we had this meme going around on social media saying that journalists haven't got the mood of the country. They don't know what they're reporting. They shouldn't be reporting these negative things about COVID, and that they should be producing positive news and helping with targeting the COVID virus. But the reality is that journalists have a job to do. They're independent, as Alexander is here. It's about telling the truth. I mean, I know that we can't be solely responsible for telling the truth, but we have a really important role in democracies for the press, and that's about keeping an eye on the people who are in positions of power and revealing things when they're not doing what they should be doing. And we need, as journalists, I think we need to look at that, how we present ourselves a lot more. So Donald Trump has made it acceptable to attack journalists and attack their work, and which has translated into physical attacks at these Black Lives Matter protests. But we need to do a better job at saying, actually, you know, what we do is really important as journalists. You know, we're not saying, you know, we're not trying to be negative all the time, but that's naturally the way it comes over sometimes. I think, you know, that we're, you know, reporting these negative things, and of course we're in the middle of a global health pandemic, so there are lots of negative stories around. And yes, we do try to cover positive news stories as journalists anyway, not necessarily, you know, in my role at Index, but you know, journalists in the wider sense, you know, they are reporting these positive stories, but there are a lot of negative stories around. But we need to actually say to people out there, saying, look, we're just doing our jobs. We I know it's a very negative story that we're relating here, but we're just trying to tell you the reality on the ground, you know, whether that's, you know, the number of people who've died from COVID, or that there's been corruption, you know, which we've seen, you know, all over the world, you know, in the awarding of huge contracts like here in the UK to people who have close connections with the ruling Conservative Party, for example, you know, multi-billion-pound contracts that are being awarded with very little scrutiny. And we've noticed, you know, a huge amount of that going on, and you know, at that large scale, but also the small scale. And that's just in the UK. And we know that that's going on around the world, and that there are stories that because journalists are being attacked and are fearful, as Alexander has very clearly stated to us, you know, that he's fearful about this. You know, he knows the information, but he's fearful to tell that. But without people like Alexander and other brave journalists and bloggers around the world, I mean, how are we going to hold them to account? You know, that I know that they have a very difficult job to do. I wouldn't like to be a political leader right now trying to deal with this, but you know, we're not the enemy as journalists.
Yeah, this comes to my brain to think about the 240 incidents that you are covering in the disease control from until mid-September. You told me about Tanzania. I wanted to leave the US and the UK a little bit and look out in Europe and the other continents. And we spoke upon the authoritarian leaders.
Yeah, so I've been writing this week about Tanzania, for example, which, like the US, has been having elections. So earlier this week they had an election, and you know, it was fairly clear early on that John Magufuli, who's the incumbent president there, you know, the opinion polls were saying that he would get re-elected. You know, he had a very, very strong lead. But it's interesting to see, you know, why that has happened. And so, you know, early in the year, in January, he said, you know, he was committed, you know, unlike many leaders in Africa, to free and fair elections. But, you know, the evidence since then is that actually he's not. So he's closed down independent media. You know, so his political rivals have been prevented from registering for the elections. But then there's also the matter of his response to COVID as well. So, you know, it's interesting to look at the statistics. We've talked a lot here about, you know, official statistics. If you look at Tanzania's official statistics, they've stayed at something like 500 cases since June. And, you know, the government might have you believe that that's because they've somehow miraculously succeeded in beating COVID, unlike every other country in the world, maybe apart from Turkmenistan as well. But you know, the reality is that you know, John Magufuli feels that, you know, COVID has been overblown and it may be, you know, fake news. And so there was a case earlier on in the year where he set up the public health authorities to do some tests, and they carried out some tests on some samples, and they came back with COVID, but it turned out that they'd actually been provided from animals and you know, fruit and things like this. So you know, this discredited the whole testing regime in the country, and then shortly afterwards they stopped producing official statistics. But he then sort of turned this around and said, well, actually, you know, this is you know, God helping us here. It's the power of prayer that's saved us from COVID. And so, you know, Tanzania has effectively returned to normal everyday life, and people are congregating, and you know, the independent journalists say that, you know, the reality is that tens of thousands of people may have had COVID and may still have COVID in the country, but because no one's talking about it, John Magufuli is reaping the benefit of that because people believe that he's actually helped cure it with help from God.
The religious leaders around the world are using this situation as well as the dictators. They make a good club together right now. Alexander, can I ask you, what is the main thing that you see that organizations like JFJ and Index on Censorship can do to help a person like you reporting from the ground?
Actually, I didn't think about it, but I feel great support right now. So I guess that's already quite enough for me.
Taking part in seminars like this, maybe as well.
I did know what expect about this seminar, but it's because of my English level. I just don't know. Are you understanding me at all?
We are. Yeah, we are.
But it's a great thing. Yes, this seminars obviously helped me to get through this situation and try to forget about all these perils, try to continue my job, my work.
Mm-hmm. Does any of you panelists have any questions to each other? Are you thinking about anything that you want to ask one of the others? I just want to pick up this.
Well, I think, from my perspective, I just want to, thank Alexander for doing this. And, he is one of many hundreds and maybe thousands of people around the world who are doing this. And, I do consider myself lucky. I'm sitting, in the UK where it's very safe, but I'm speaking to people like Alexander all the time, and we recognize and appreciate the strength and fortitude that you show, and that you're doing this, and it must be very, very difficult. I cannot understand the challenges that you must be facing in your day-to-day work, and if there is anything that we can do to help you, then we will obviously do that. We're a small organization, but part of what we do is telling these stories to a wider audience, so that people are not overlooked and forgotten, and so many of these people who we talk about in these stories. So I talked about one of the Chinese bloggers who disappeared at the very early stages of this, and it's important that we remember who they are and remember their names, and keep asking, where is this person? And so I'm hoping that that's one thing that we can do, is just so that people like that are not forgotten. But we welcome any input as well from people like Alexander to say how we can help you in different ways. Thank
you, Mark, for your support, and yes, there's a lot of things here in Russia that I just can't explain to the people who never live here. But I know that I got some strong support from the other journalists, from lots of my colleagues. They wrote letters to the Russian authorities to stop my case, and they actually didn't react. But I feel the support of the whole Russian journalism, and right now I feel that I get support from all over the world. That's great. Thank you.
That's great to hear. Alexander, when we talked before, you said that working from Novgorod it's a bit different from working from, for example, Moscow.
Yes, Moscow is not Russia, as we used to say here.
Because you said everyone knows each other, companies members of families own companies and so on. I can imagine it's like a small country as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where everybody knows each other and our family, politicians and company leaders and so on. Could you tell us what is the biggest difficulty with working in a smaller town with 1 million?
It sounds strange, but I got quite good relationships with local officials, and 2 days before my article, I actually had a Zoom conference with the governor of Nizhny Novgorod region, and he looked very confused about the whole situation, and he asked all the journalists and bloggers to find some new words about this pandemic, this virus, to make people stay home, to try to make it be more careful and think about self-safety. So I wrote some of these articles, and now I got the court case on me. It's different.
Has that person said anything? Has that person backed you? No, because he's official.
That wasn't officially. He said that he tried to help me in this situation, but the investigators worked very quickly about my case, and I don't think that the government has any influence on this case, even if he said about it to me. Maybe he just wanted me to believe in that, in this. Yes.
We have some minutes left. I wanted to ask you, Mark, how has it been working with the data journalism that you have been doing, mapping 230 incidents?
I think the challenge is, I referred to it earlier about verifying the stories. Sometimes that is the hardest element of it. The technology is relatively easy. We use standard Google mapping, and we've worked with developers to develop our map, but the actual verification process is often the hardest thing, because that's very reliant on traditional journalism skills, like picking up the phone and contacting people like Alexander and actually talking to them. And so, a lot of things I can remember talking to people in the Philippines over Facebook, and and the difficulty obviously with the pandemic is that you can't physically go to places to meet people. So, in some ways it's been made easier, and with tools like Zoom, as we're on today, enabling us to talk to people. But as we know, a lot of these technologies are not very secure either. So this is why we use things like Telegram and Signal. It's really that element of it that's proven the most difficult. And in a lot of these countries, the authorities don't want you to contact these people to find out these stories, because they don't want that story to come out. So there are cases that we've had reported that we haven't been able to put on our map, just because we haven't been able to get independent verification of those, which is, it's sad that that's the case, but obviously we try to put on as many as we can. I think the other, before we end as well, it's also worth mentioning that there's another sort of hidden thing that's been going on as well, particularly in countries like the UK and the US, where journalism is at risk, local journalism particularly, because of the financial situation. The economies are really struggling at this time, and the media industry is really struggling right now. So a lot of local newspapers have been forced to stop printing their print editions, for example, so they can't gain the money that people used to buy that newspaper. But also at the same time, they've had their other source of income decimated. That's advertising revenue, because all of the businesses that would normally advertise in the newspapers have stopped doing that, because often because they can't open. So we've seen many newspapers close down here in the UK, and it's not just in the UK, it's all over the world. And often it's those sorts of publications that are very sort of localized, and and it's not just newspapers either, it's bloggers who rely on support from links and things like this, that everybody's had their income from these things massively reduced, and they're the ones who reveal these stories very often. So the stories that you see on the national news very often come from people on the ground who are reporting for a local newspaper or on their hyper-local blog, and they're not able to do that anymore because they can't get any income for it. So I think we're having a huge, we're going to have a huge deficit here that's going to, and it may not ever come back either. A lot of these newspapers, for example, have been around for hundreds of years, and they've been forced to close by this and may never reopen again. And some of those stories that they covered will never be reported on, and I think that's a very sad day for democracy.
It really is. It really is. I get so many thoughts when you started to talk right now, so I forgot what I wanted to ask Maria. You told us about when laws getting back, like we see in Hungary and Poland has been changing the laws during this pandemic situation. We can't get those situations back. Is that a thing you see in your countries as well? The sound, Maria.
Yes, I mean, introduction of all the laws that are suppressive. We don't believe that they will be then turned back to normal, because this is so convenient, for the authorities. They are not, unfortunately, interested. And I'm talking, of course, about countries like Russia and Belarus and Central Asian countries and Azerbaijan, countries that are not democratic. And the governments are just using this situation as they would use any other crisis to further suppress the independent reporting. And what it leads to, of course, in countries like that, and we are seeing it now, is that the depletion of trust between the population and the authorities leads to more and more aggression. And in Belarus, for example, there is a big belief that this lack of trust to the government was basically the last drop that led to the current revolution that is going on, when the government was telling one thing that was completely different from the real state of things, and the population just had enough and decided to take it onto the streets, and is still there until the illegitimate president leaves. And same situation in Kyrgyzstan, where people took it to the streets again. There is a belief that the suppression of information about the real state of affairs in terms of the pandemics in this country contributed to this situation. So yeah, that's what it leads to.
We have a big struggle with the freedom of information and the freedom of speech, and people using their voices out in the streets aren't possible right now in the normal way around the world. We saw that in the BLM situation as well, a big contrast situation. Yeah, so Alexander, when I was talking to you, I couldn't stop by thinking about the other main big situation that happened in Ukraine, the Chernobyl situation, in the media cover of that situation. Do you feel have you the same sentences in your stomach about this situation?
Actually, no. I don't think that the situation here in Nizhny Novgorod and here in Russian common is more ridiculous. It's about proving that you, as I already said, I need to prove that you're a normal human being.
Yeah.
It's kind of anti-utopic as I think about it right now. We just trying to survive here in local journalism. We don't think about the global situation, and don't actually compare us to some other cases.
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
It's hard to explain. I know that.
No, you just want to go on working as a professional journalist in your city.
It's the main target. Yes, I need to go on. I need to continue.
Mm-hmm. We hope that, of course, you will.
Different thoughts about it. Yes, I had no chance. That's my job. I must earn some money. I listened to what Mark said, and I know that these kind of problems. I know it very well, because I got 3 internet sites, and we got all these advertising troubles, and we got all of the troubles with the money for people who worked on us. That's the global situation. In that case, I feel that we're in the same boat.
Thank you, all 3 of you, for
Thank
joining
you.
us today. Alexander.
Thank you very much.
And Maria.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and thanks for your time. And Alexander, we wish you well in your court appearance as well in November. So do keep us informed on that, and we will do what we can to support you.
I will tell you, of course.
Definitely. Good luck.
Do believe that we
Goodbye.
are here in the behind the scenes. We are here.
Thank you, Zandra. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Anna Maria, I give the word to you.
Thank you, Maria, Alexander, Mark, and Zandra, for this very important discussion. The Museum of Movements will continue operating for the rest of the year, and we are going to be spearheading the conversation regarding safe havens. So let's stay in touch. The next Freedom Talk will be in November with Uyghurpen, so stay tuned. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.
Thanks, bye.